How's it going, my truant people? Dr. Slacking, the Slacking Doctor, back with a brand new draft analysis for your Boland bovines. Now, this draft analysis is for the NPL Tryout Tournament. If you don't know what the NPL is, it's one of the biggest draft leagues in the community, certainly the biggest we've been involved in. And this tryout tournament is a chance for a number of coaches that have applied with the hope of getting into the NPL to draft a team, battle each other for, I believe it's something like 6 games we're going to get to play. If we then qualify from our group, we could have extra games in the knockout stage. I'm not sure if that'll happen just yet, but it's exciting to have the prospect. And it's really just a chance for us to show what we can do and hopefully, you know, maybe if we're lucky, get a chance to be featured in the next upcoming season of the NPL. Now, obviously, I am relatively new to draft format, so I'm not expecting to just go in and take this tournament by storm. But, you know, I'm trying to target maybe breaking even, maybe going positive in the group if we can. At the very least, I want to target breaking even and show what we can do. And at the very least, from the perspective of the channel, it gives us a chance to see some of the best battlers in the community in action, up close and personal. Hopefully, we can learn some things from these guys. We can learn some things from the way they've drafted, from the way they play in this tournament. And it's just amazing to even be in the conversation for the NPL. So before I get straight into this draft, I've just got to shout out a few people. First off, I've got to shout out the one guy, Elliot to most of us. He was the one that really encouraged me to even apply for this. I would not have had the confidence to apply for the NPL if it wasn't for him. So shout out to Elliot. As always, I've got to shout out my friend Office. They help me with everything I do in the draft community these days, and I'm always very, very grateful to them. And I've also got to shout out Boots and Haz as well, who I briefly discussed my draft with at different times and who were a great help in me kind of understanding my draft plan and where I was going with it. Even if they didn't agree with exactly what I was envisioning for the draft, they gave me some feedback that I was able to take on board and think more critically about what I was doing. But more than anyone, I really have to shout out Checkmate Ben. As always, he was the one that was really, really heavily involved in this draft plan. We worked on this together, we argued about this for days, and I mean, we really have been bickering this time about this draft plan. This was not a plan that we saw eye to eye on a lot of times. We were really kind of fighting out, thrashing it out to make sure we got the absolute best plan we possibly could, and we got Pokemon that I wanted to use as well. So a big thank you to all those guys for helping me out here. As I say, this draft wouldn't exist without them. I wouldn't even be in this tournament without them, so shout out to them. But without wasting any more time, let's just jump straight into the draft and kind of talk about this unconventional draft, because that's really what it was. I'm not going to go into too much detail about snipes and things like that. I'm not going to really stick to a round by round breakdown of what I drafted, which I've done sometimes before. Instead, I'm just going to tell you what mon I drafted, kind of in the order of importance or in the order of their pricing. So we're going to go from most expensive Pokemon to least expensive Pokemon, and we're just going to talk about what they do, what they bring to the team, and what I'm hoping to kind of explore with them this tournament. So first off, it wasn't actually our most expensive mon, but I want to kick off with our Mega, because really this whole plan was built around our Mega Pokemon. So leading the charge for us is Mega Beedrill. We picked this thing up for 12 points, and the reason I decided to build around this was I felt that in the NPL tiering system, in the doc we were provided with, I felt that the Megas were the most underpriced thing on there. Now, Megas weren't compulsory, we didn't have to draft a Mega, although I think that most drafts benefited from it. But what that meant is that rather than being relative just to each other, the Megas in terms of their pricing were actually relative to non-Mega Pokemon. So, for example, Mega Beedrill was 12 points. In some drafts, that would be not that relevant if you had to draft a Mega and all the other Megas were 12 points, 10 points, whatever it may be. But in a draft where you don't have to draft a Mega, suddenly having a cheap Mega like that becomes really, really valuable. And I felt like I could build a very good plan around Mega Beedrill. We do currently have it in Owl, we traded for it there, and I'm just starting to get to grips with it there. But also I feel like it would play like a slightly better version, in some respects a slightly better version of the Scolipede that I've had in the ABC. And I say slightly better just in terms of because it's got the instant speed without the speed boost, and it has the great pivot potential. Now I realise it's not as much as a setup sweeper, it doesn't have the kind of infinite speed that Scolipede can hit. It can't speed pass like Scolipede can in this league. You know, it can't do those things necessarily, but what it really, really can do is getting hit really hard with adaptability based like 145 speed, and I can't even remember what its attack is, but I think it's like 160 or something stupid attack, and it just hits with those dual stabs that Scolipede had that I've got really used to with the ground coverage, with the dark coverage and knockoff and drill run, pivot option and U-turn. It can do so much that I have kind of got used to building around that offensive typing, that I feel super, super comfortable with Beedrill on the team. And Mega Beedrill this season is going to be nicknamed Strumpful, after of course Strumpf, one of my best friends in this community. Strumpf needed to have a powerful Pokemon in this draft named after him, so I went with Mega Beedrill for him. Now Beedrill kind of started something that Ben and I were looking to build on this draft, that I'm going to kind of coin the term here, and maybe it's been used before, I'm not quite sure, maybe I've heard it somewhere before and I'm repeating it, but I think I have. And we're going to talk about Momentum Trap. That was kind of the vision for this draft, the buzz term for this draft was Momentum Trap. We disagreed on how much that trap part would come into play, Ben and I, but we did get some trapping in. I'll talk about that in a minute, but this Mega Beedrill really kicks us off with the momentum that I'm talking about. 145 base speed with that U-turn gives us fantastic fast U-turn straight off the bat, fantastic fast momentum straight away, and it forces some teams to try and run Scarfers to revenge killers if they want to do that, go that route, and various other things like that. Beedrill forces prep, which it has in common with our second pickup. And now, our second pickup, I didn't draft this round 2, as I said, I'm not really going too much into the rounds. This was kind of a late pick. I will just briefly mention snipes here. What I wanted here was Infernape or Emboar. Both of those got sniped, unfortunately, and they are relevant because I do think that Infernape or Emboar would have fit our draft better. However, I'm still really excited to have Keldeo on the squad. Now, I do think Keldeo will be a great fit on this team. With its massive special attack and its fighting stab and its water stab, it really breaks so many things that Mega Beedrill can't. So what I mean by that is steel types fear Keldeo, as do fire types. Now, they are two of the best checks to Mega Beedrill, as do rock types as well, actually. They are three of the best defensive typings to kind of switch in on a Mega Beedrill. So if we pivot out with a fast U-turn from Mega Beedrill into Keldeo on a steel type, on a rock type, on a fire type, suddenly we then threaten them back out with our stab moves, and Keldeo is one of these ones that is just so hard to switch into. I understand that people dislike Keldeo in draft because it has such a shallow move pool, but in reality, Keldeo can run a lot of different sets in terms of setup, in terms of the items it can run. It can do different things while relying on a relatively shallow move pool, and when your stab hits that hard, sometimes you don't need coverage. Sometimes just clicking Hydro Pump with Specs Keldeo is enough to not even care about coverage. What Keldeo gives us is a second really impressive win con on this draft. You know, Scarf Keldeo can just clear up games in the same way that Mega Beedrill can. It gives us a special attacker. It gives us a breaker to really match Beedrill's weaknesses. So I'm super excited to have Keldeo, and Keldeo is going to be one of our Z users. Now, the way Z users worked is we had 25 points to spend on Z users. Keldeo was 14 points, so this would be the first of our Z users, leaving us 11 for another. That was just fine. We pick up something for 11 points later in the draft, so we filled that out perfectly. I really like Keldeo as a Z user because, you know, sometimes it might give us the option of bluffing different things, it might give us the option of running a calm mindset, it might just make us have a little bit more powerful stab and be even harder to switch into. It just gives us even greater breaking potential, and it gives our opponent more things to worry about Keldeo doing. And Keldeo is going to be named after my man Metro. You might remember our battle with Metro from Owl Season 1 if you've been around the channel since then. Metro is, in my opinion, the best Keldeo player I've seen in the community. I'm sure there might be people that are as good as him out there with Keldeo, but from what I've seen, no one rivals him. He is awesome with Keldeo. And I also just think Metro is a super cool nickname for a Keldeo. So I'm really happy to have Metro on the squad. Our third mon now was actually our first overall pick, and I caught some heat for this pick. I've caught it in a few different servers and a few different whatever. People could not understand this as a round 1 pick. I should say I was pretty late in round 1, but people are still saying that this is by no means a round 1 pick, and I get that. I know this isn't a round 1 pick. Some people are putting it down to me being inexperienced. No, it's not that at all. I know this isn't a first overall or a first round 1 pick. Nevertheless, it was the most important mon on this draft in my opinion, so that's why I took it round 1. I get that might seem strange to some people, and parts of me do regret it because of the Infernape snipe, because of some other stuff, but I still think it's a really crucial Pokemon. I'm still delighted to have it. And that Pokemon is Dugtrio. So here you see the start of this momentum trap, as I was kind of talking about, that buzzword. This is the trapper we picked up. Ben also wants me to pick up Gothitelle and Magneton. I didn't want to do that. I don't really like either of those as Pokemon. I do like Dugtrio. I tested a battle against Ben with it, and actually I got on really well with it. So I'm super happy to have Dugtrio on the draft. I think that I can put in work with this thing. I might be wrong, but now's the time to try it. This is only a short tournament. It's worth risking something new here. There's nothing to lose. The way Dugtrio synergizes with what we have already is it also pressures steels and electrics and fire types and rock types, in fact, as well, in the same way that Keldeo pressures 3 of those. Its stab hits the things that Beedrill can't hit that well. The only thing left that we aren't really hitting at the minute are flying types. Between Dugtrio, Keldeo, and Mega Beedrill, we're really handling Beedrill's checks very effectively. But what's more, if things like electric types want to run Scarf to try and revenge kill Keldeo, then suddenly they're in a real spot of bother, because if they lock into that electric move, then I switch into Dugtrio, they're in a world of hurt if they haven't got a Shed Shell and they're trapped in. And I think that's really what Dugtrio does so well here. I should also mention actually Poison types as well is another type that kind of checks Mega Beedrill defensively to some regard, but Dugtrio really handles effectively. And I think that's the point. I think Dugtrio forces prep in the same way that Mega Beedrill does, in the same way that Keldeo does. Dugtrio forces people to think when they're building their team. You know, maybe they can't run leftovers on their steel types. Maybe they have to run Shed Shell. Well, okay, that's fine by me, because that means your steel type is getting worn down that much faster every time I U-turn. Every time it takes that little bit of rocks chip, that little bit of other chip. You know, it really forces things to get worn down, especially steels, rocks, poison. These aren't typings that get a lot of reliable recovery. So we're really starting to wear them down. And those that do get reliable recovery in, say, like the poison typing, they tend to be part grass type, which means that they're not really Mega Beedrill switch-ins because they're then going to be neutral to its bug stat. Now, it is worth mentioning that Dugtrio's stats are somewhat underwhelming. You know, base 100 attack isn't amazing, but it does give us a great speed tier now. So we have Mega Beedrill hitting the 145, Keldeo hitting the 108, and Dugtrio hitting the 120. That means we're pretty much filled in as much as we need to be filled in from 145 down to 108. That's pretty much perfect for the high speed tiers. Yes, I could arguably get something around the 130 mark if I wanted to be a perfectionist, but I don't care that much. Once you get over 120 speed, I think just to have one mon over that speed somewhere is perfect for your speed tiers. As I've already said, you know, what we're doing is we're forcing Scarfers. Mega Beedrill might require fire types to be Scarfed to Revenge Kill it. Keldeo might require electric types to be Scarfed to Revenge Kill it. And Dugtrio feeds on both of those things. So I think there's some really nice synergy in our first 3 picks here. And Dugtrio is going to be named after my man Haz. You guys might remember Haz from this season and Owl. We battled him early on. He's such a nice guy, and he's been talking to me a lot about the NPL. He knew some people in the server already, so he just kind of congratulated me on getting into this tryout tournament and has really given me a lot of encouragement and feedback on the draft. So Dugtrio is going to be named Haz, H, and Harry after Haz. I just thought it was a pretty amusing nickname to have one of each of them named after him. So that's Haz, H, and Harry, our Dugtrio. The next pick isn't a Trapper. As I said, that's the only Trapper on the draft, but it is another Momentum mon. Our next pick was Rotomwash. Now, while Mega Beedrill gave us really fast momentum, what Rotomwash does is give us that slow pivot, that slow Volt Switch into Dugtrio, into Keldeo, and suddenly get those 2 mons in for free. You know, Rotomwash sponges a hit, Volt Switches out, and we get one of our breakers, one of our sweepers in for free, and we start applying offensive pressure. What's more, it's a really great defogger which supports Mega Beedrill. Mega Beedrill doesn't like getting worn down by rocks. It wants to keep coming in for free and U-turning out for free, so having a really good defogger is important. What's more, our bug type so far isn't a ground resist, so having an electric type that is immune to ground is pretty awesome with the levitate ability. And again, Keldeo isn't really a defensive water type, so adding a bulky water or at least a supportive water onto the draft I think was pretty important. And I think that word support is really crucial when looking at Rotomwash on this draft. It can do so many things, it can run so many sets, it's a really versatile Pokemon, very underrated in the draft format in my opinion. And I think it, as a support mon to those 3 offensive mons we've just picked up, I think Rotomwash can do a lot for us here. And Rotomwash is going to be named after my boy Tangela Boots. As I said, he did give me some feedback on the draft, he did give me some advice, so Rotomwash is going to be nicknamed Boots after him. He picked it round 1 overall in the ABC and then went undefeated in the ABC, so he's kind of my example here when I say that you don't have to pick up a broken Pokemon first round. If something is a perfect fit for your draft, then you can take it first overall, and you can still go undefeated in the season if you're as good as Boots, which I'm not, but if you're as good as Boots you can. So he was really kind of the inspiration there for me having the courage to take Dugtrio over first overall, and that's why I decided to name Rotomwash after him. Adding another slow pivot to the team seemed really important, and more hazard removal, so I actually picked up Old World the Mandorbus. We had this thing in Peeba. Old World was definitely a favourite of mine on our Peeba draft. It put in so much work, it is so bulky, but it's not passive. With things like Foul Play, physical sets just can't set up on you. What's more, it's a slow U-turner, again giving us more momentum and a great defogger. It gets reliable recovery and roost. It has a great defensive typing in terms of, you know, being immune to the psychics that might want to come in on Keldeo, that you might want to come in on Mega Beedrill if they're Scarfers, and also just might want to try and threaten out and wear down our team. What's really nice about Mandorbus is extremely bulky, so I think the important thing with flying types is because they are susceptible to rock chip, I think they have to be really bulky to be effective walls. So things like Zapdos, things like Mandorbus, where they are just so bulky, they have such high, you know, base stats in the defenses or the HP, whatever it may be, that they can afford to take 25% from rocks and still eat up a hit and get a roost off. I think Mandorbus really fits that bill, and I think it's important to get that if you're going to pick up a defensive flying type. I think you need that extreme level of bulk. The final thing that Mandorbus really gives us here, as I said, it gives us a threat to set up with Foul Play, but it also gives us a phaser with Whirlwind, so we can kind of phase some threats out if we need to, just sponge a hit and send something flying so we don't have to deal with it anymore. So with all that in mind, I'm looking at the team and I'm feeling like, look, we've got a really nice special breaker, we've got a really nice physical sweeper, we've got a really nice physical trapper, we've got 2 really nice walls or support mons that pivot out slowly, but I think we want to add something else, a slightly lower base speed that can give us another setup opportunity. I think that's a little bit what we're lacking at the minute. Keldeo isn't a bad calm mindset. Mega Beedrill can run Sword Stance, but it isn't always the bulkiest to get one off. So I think we needed to add something else here, and that's where we decided to pick up Porygon Z. Now, if you did follow PBA and you remember Old World the Mandorbus, I'm sure you remember Keanu Reeves the Porygon Z. Keanu Reeves is back on the squad, and I could not be happier. Porygon Z was definitely like one of my favorite Pokemon to come out of PBA. I just loved using it. It's become definitely like a staple Pokemon for me. I will draft this thing many more times in the future. With Nasty Plot, with agility, it can set up in different ways and it can do different things. With conversion, you know, it can even change its typing and really abuse that adaptability boost. And this is the 11-point Z-Mon that I discussed earlier. So after Keldeo was our first Z-Mon, Porygon will be our other. I do feel like there's a bit of a problem that both of our Z-move users are special. I would like to have had one physical, one special. I think that's marginally better for forcing prep against your opponents. However, I don't feel that it's essential, and I think that Porygon Z is just a fantastic Z user regardless. There's not much more really I need to say about Keanu Reeves. I think that's just the boy. Like, its legacy on this channel is already pretty important. Just from the one league it was in with us, it really helped us get to playoffs in PBA, and I'm hoping it can help us do work in the NPL too. So now with our offensive core really nicely fleshed out in my opinion, I wanted to try and add some another defensive mon, and I really wanted to add some hazards because we have great removal in Rotomwash and Mandorbus. We have an okay Rock Setter in Dugtrio, but it's really not the best. And we have a decent T-Spiker in Mega Beedrill. Now I know some people won't think Mega Beedrill is the best T-Spiker, but what Mega Beedrill might do is it might come in on a grass type, force that to switch out into a steel type, and as that's switching out, Mega Beedrill just collects T-Spikes. And there you go, we've got T-Spikes up for free, and if I switch out into Rotomwash that eats up the steel type hit, for example, then suddenly we got momentum back because we can get a slow Volt Switch out, and we haven't really lost anything. We've just got our T-Spike up and we're back in the kind of race again. But what we don't have, as I say, is the best rocker, because I don't feel like Dugtrio is the best rocker. I feel like it's a little bit flimsy, and I feel like it really wants to be attacking most of the time when it's on the field. So I wanted to pick up the most reliable rocker I could find, and you may have noticed so far we haven't started many cores. We've got 2 water types, no fire, no grass, and we have no fairy, dragon, or steel type. Now, the steel type I had in mind was Metagross. I really wanted Metagross on the draft because it added priority, which is something I was sorely lacking at this point. I do think priority could be important, especially on a draft like this, just for chipping things down for those sweepers to come in at the end. But unfortunately, Metagross did go really early, and I wasn't able to grab that, and I played around with a lot of steel types for a long time, trying to decide what I needed from a steel type. And I think crucially, with Mega Beedrill, with Keldeo on the draft, I needed a steel type that resisted Fairy and resisted Psychic. That was really important. So I looked at things like Kecleon, but they didn't resist the typings that I needed them to. So in the end, I decided to go with a pretty solid defensive mon and just about the most reliable rocker you can find out there, to be honest with you. We picked up Bronzong. Now, Bronzong really fills out that defensive core nicely with Mandorbus, Rotomwash, and Bronzong. There's not a lot of things that are going to be breaking through that with ease. Yes, Rotomwash and Bronzong lack reliable recovery, but they are just so bulky, they can sponge a few hits for sure. And there's not many games where you don't see Bronzong get its rocks up, especially with being either resistant to fire or immune to ground. Is an awesome defensive steel type, one of the best in the league format. With offensive pressure in things like really slow Gyro Balls or Psywave, which pretty much always breaks subs, Bronzong really isn't a super passive mon like some people think. What it gives us along with Porygon Z is a nice little Trick Room option. Min speed Porygon Z, min speed Bronzong under Trick Room, these things can actually do some work. So I definitely think having Bronzong on the team is a huge asset for us. And Bronzong is going to be named Elliot after the one guy. Elliot, as I said, convinced me to apply to the NPL. I've seen him draft Bronzong quite a few times, and I know it's a mon he's really keen on. So we're going to name Bronzong after him. That's going to be Elliot the Bronzong. Now, next up and filling up the second slot of that Fairy Dragon Steel Core, and actually the last slot we get, is our Fairy type. Spoilers, we didn't draft a Dragon this time. I think Dragon is the least important in that core. Whilst it's great offensively, and defensively actually it's resistant to a lot of types too, I feel like it's non-essential because it isn't immune to any types that you need it to be immune to or anything else. You can kind of pick up the resistances in other typings, so I do think if you can get a good Dragon, you should always get a good Dragon, but I don't think you need to try and cram a budget Dragon onto your draft. I just don't feel it is a necessary typing in that sense. But I don't think that's the case for Fairies. I think Fairies are essential on the majority of drafts because Dragons are so potent offensively in the draft format. In fact, in Pokemon as a whole, I think it's really, really important to have a good fairy so that you have that immunity to Dragon Stab. You know, if you're coming up against a team with setup Zygarde, with setup Salamence, with Kieran Black, with whatever it is, you don't want them to be able to just spam Dragon moves and have no immunity at all. Resistances I don't think are enough just for some of the most powerful Dragon types in this format. And our fairy type isn't actually the most bulky, it's kind of a more offensive fairy, but I still think it can do a lot on this team, and I think it can do a lot because of its support moveset, because of all the kind of niche options it gets, and that is Gardevoir. Now, just running it back to speed tiers for a moment, because that's where I'd like to begin with Gardevoir. Gardevoir has a base 80 speed, where Porygon Z has a base 90 speed, so that's a really nice little speed creep in there. And then we go up to Keldeo at 108, so unfortunately we didn't fill that gap very well between 90 and 108, but it's not the worst thing in the world. The only real gap is between about 104 and 108, where things can run Adamant and Modest. So Gardevoir gives us a really great speed tier for the team. It gives us a really great offensive typing in Fairy and Psychic. Some of the best checks to Gardevoir are basically Steel types, which, as we've already seen, my draft pressures Steel types all over. Mega Beedrill gets Steel types to switch in, Porygon Z gets Steel types to switch in, Gardevoir gets Steel types to switch in. Suddenly my opponent's Steel types, especially if they've only got one on the draft and they're not being able to run leftovers because they're having to run Shed Shell, suddenly that Steel type is in a world of hurt if it's having to switch into 3 different mons. So, 3 or 4 mons on my draft on the team of 6 that I'm bringing in a given week. If it's having to switch into all of them, that mon's going to be on the field taking a lot of hits. So I really like Gardevoir for that reason as well. But what Gardevoir also did was give me a fighting resist, which was crucial because Bronzong was my first psychic type on the team and it didn't resist fighting types. And the common revenge killer to Porygon Z would be fighting types, and I always like to try and pick up a good resist to whatever the revenge killers are to your offensive mons. But one thing we lacked was either a ghost or a fighting resist to cover Porygon Z's weakness. So that's where Gardevoir comes in. 4 times resistant to fighting means it's a really great switch in despite its, not great natural bulk, but it can still take a hit because of the 4 times resist. And as I've said, what Gardevoir can really lend to draft is a really awesome support moveset with things like Will-O-Wisp, with things like Memento, with things like Healing Wish, with things like Wish. This thing could be a cleric, it can be a supporter, I can run its Scarf, I can run its Specs. It's a really, really versatile mon that can be offensive, that can be defensive, that can be supportive. It can do any role I want it to in any given match, and I think that's awesome. So whilst Gardevoir isn't a mon that you see regularly in the draft format, I think it can do some work here on this team. I might be wrong, but I think it can, and it actually gives us a weird little bit of momentum again. With that Healing Wish, with that Memento, yes, it's not a U-turner like Mandorbus and Rotomwash, or a Volt Switcher like Rotomwash, but it is kind of a strange pivot in a way, certainly for getting in certain mons to sweep late game. It's great at doing that. And Gardevoir here is going to be named after my boy Foss, but we're actually going to be calling it Dean. Now, the reason for this one is quite childish. It's the only one on my draft that Dean liked to begin with, but also I just think Dean is the worst possible name for a Gardevoir. I just don't think it fits at all, and I think a Gardevoir named Dean is just comically stupid. So that's why we have Dean the Gardevoir on the draft. Our next pick gives us some better momentum than Gardevoir in terms of being a more reliable momentum user, and that is Sarina. Now, Sarina is another slow U-turner that we can add to the list, so you can already see at this point now we have Mega Beedrill with fast U-turn, Rotomwash with slow Volt Switch, Mandorbus with slow Volt Switch, Gardevoir with potentially fast or slow Memento Healing Wish, and then Sarina with slow U-turn. That's like 5 or 6 pivots already on this draft. Like 50% of this draft is pivoting into our breakers, into our sweepers, which is amazing. Sarina gives us a really nice defensive with that grass type, filling out 2 parts of that fire, water, grass core. Now, spoilers, we don't actually pick up a fire type, we never add that to the team. Once again, I don't think that fire type is that essential on the draft. I think of the 3 is the least important in that core. Just in terms of the defensive resistance it gives you and the things that it breaks, I think that other typings can do it just as well if you fill out your other typings well and your other niche as well. So Sarina is going to be our grass type, and Sarina is going to be named after my man NIKO, because you already know he is my Tsar, he is my queen, he is majestic. Every time we get any Pokemon with regal connotations on any draft, we name that one NIKO, so that is NIKO the Sarina. And what I love about Sarina is that it can be a defensive mon. I think it has around base 80-ish HP and base 90-ish defenses, maybe it's base 100-ish defenses and 70 HP, something like that. But it has decent bulk actually for a defensive Pokemon. It gets access to Leech Seed and reliable recovery and synthesis. As I've said already, it gives me slow momentum. It could be a great Assault Vest user if I want to sponge hits that way, but what's really, really crucial here is it is not passive by any stretch of the imagination. Base 120 attack combined with powerful Power Whip Stab, that is a high base power move. If I want to run this thing Banded, if I want to run this thing Scarf, Sarina can be an offensive problem to a lot of teams and definitely should not be slept on. It gets what is, in my opinion, the best coverage move in the game in Knockoff. I think it's the most spammable move in the game. Even with Megas and Z moves being introduced, not every team is going to have a convenient Mega or a convenient Z move user to switch in on Sarina, so I do think that Knockoff is still the best kind of coverage move in the game, especially for a physical attacker. So I think that while Sarina's move pool is somewhat limited, I guess, just having Power Whip, Knockoff, U-Turn, Rapid Spin, and that's really crucial. It gives us our Spinner. We had great removal and defog on Rotomwash and Mandorbus, but now we're really adding a great Spinner as well, so we can keep our T-Spikes up if we set T-Spikes with Mega Beedrill. But I think all of those moves in conjunction give Sarina enough viability to really fill a role on this team. So here's hoping NIKO, as always, can put in work for us. And now our penultimate pick in the draft. Now this was actually our final round pick, but we're doing it second from last as it was our second cheapest Pokemon that we drafted. This was Galicia Pod. I actually think Galicia Pod is arguably one of the best designed Pokemon in Gen 7. I think it looks fantastic. It was such a cool Pokemon. From the first time we all saw it, I think everyone knew Galicia Pod was just awesome. And unfortunately, it got this ability that has caught it so much hate and so much flack. A lot of people just do not rate Galicia Pod because of that emergency exit ability. And I understand that. I can appreciate that. It is definitely a weird ability that in a lot of scenarios is crippling for the Pokemon. But what it gives me to this draft is two really great forms of priority in First Impression and Aqua Jet, both stab priority. It also gives me a spike setter, so now we have a T-Spiker, we have a really reliable rocker, we have a secondary rocker, and now we have a spike setter. It also gives me a weird kind of pivot, so talking back about that momentum trap, if I want to throw Galicia Pod in, maybe take a bit of chip, emergency exit, pop back out, and then go into something like Dugtrio, like Keldeo, like Porygon Z, it might just give us a strange kind of momentum here. Now, that isn't the sole reason that I've drafted Galicia Pod, and I think anyone that drafts Galicia Pod just to chuck it out, take some chip, and then pivot back out again isn't really using it properly. I think this one can do so much more. You know, base 125 attack, if I'm remembering right, makes it really, really hard hitting. As I've said already, it does get dual priority, both stab, it gets, you know, powerful stab in liquidation, powerful stab in leech life. Like, this thing can do a lot. With a citrus berry, we can potentially stop the emergency exit from popping and get another hit off. I really do think that Galicia Pod can do a little bit for the team here. So I'm definitely hyped to have Galicia Pod on the draft, and we're going to name this after Sean. You guys probably know Sean by now, Blind Messiah. We've played him many times on the channel. He's one of my best friends in this draft community. I've met him in real life, and, you know, he's just such a cool guy. So he asked to have the Galicia Pod named after him, and I was like, yeah, no problem. So that is going to be Sean the Galicia Pod. And our final pick is also named after someone who I'm very close to in the draft community. I didn't want to pick this Pokemon. I'm going to be straight out forthcoming about this. I did not plan to pick this Pokemon. Our draft was supposed to look slightly different to this. We weren't supposed to have Gardevoir, we were supposed to have Diancie, and we were not supposed to have this Pokemon, we were supposed to have Gligar. The reason being, we have a slight electric problem on the draft. With Keldeo, Galicia Pod, and Rotomwash, we have triple water, which isn't ideal. With Mandorbus, we have another weakness to electric, because of course Rotom isn't actually weak to electric, it's just that our electric doesn't resist. Our only electric resists are Dugtrio and Sarina, and whilst I do think Sarina can be a bulky electric resist and can do that very, very well, Dugtrio is a little bit more flimsy, and I might not always want to risk it on hard switches into electric types. So I had planned to pick up Gligar in this slot as a fighting resist because our fairy wasn't going to be a fighting resist, our fairy was going to be Diancie. But I decided to shift the plan around so that I could grab this mon and I could grab Gardevoir. I was really excited to have Gardevoir on the draft, so I didn't mind doing it. But I had to pick this mon for someone special, for someone in particular. He's a pain in the arse and he's hard work, but he helped me with this whole draft plan. So we picked up Kecleon, and it's going to be named Checkmate after Checkmate Ben. Ben loves Kecleon. It's one of his favourite Pokemon. He drafted it in the LTC. He put in work with it in the LTC. He absolutely swears by this thing. He nagged me like crazy to draft it throughout the NPL draft, and I told him I wasn't going to, and then I didn't tell him that I did. I just told him to go and look and see my draft and see that it was on there. It's a bit of a surprise for him. So this was just my way of saying thank you to Ben for always helping me by drafting one of his favourites in Kecleon. Now that by no means that Kecleon is a wasted pick on this team, because it isn't. Kecleon can do a lot here. For starters, with 120 special defense, this thing is pretty bulky. Yes, its HP is only like 60 or something if I'm remembering right, but it's still pretty bulky on the special side. It does get reliable recovery, it does get stealth rock, so it is a really reliable stealth rocker if it's in against special type hitting Pokemon. And it also gives us dual stab priority, maybe triple stab priority, I'm not quite sure. I know it gets Sucker Punch, I know it gets Shadow Sneak, and it might even get Fake Out, I'm not quite sure on that one. So just like Galicia Pod added some priority later on, so does Kecleon. It adds another reliable rocker, like I've said, and it adds another Trick Room option. And if you look at our team now, you know, Kecleon, Galicia Pod, Sarina, Bronzong, Porygon Z, Rotomwash, even Gardevoir, all of these things can be run min speed slow and under Trick Room hit really hard. So now my opponent not only has to worry about running Scarfers to try and handle things like Mega Beedrill, like the Trio, like Keldeo, but my opponent also has to worry about potentially running some things with min speed to try and prevent me just plowing through them under Trick Room. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important to give myself different options on the draft. I think it's really important to have all these different things that can do, and Kecleon is exactly an example of that. With Protean ability, giving it stab on any move that it has, and with a really, really good move pool actually, it does give us a lot of versatility here. And again, with it kind of taking some niche moves like potentially Trick Room or Stealth Rocks or whatever else, it might just take some pressure off some of the other mons on a draft and give them more freedom to run different sets. So they are the 11 mons I chose to draft for the Alolan Bovines for this tournament, for this preliminary tournament, in the hope of getting into the NPL. I did have the option to draft 9 Pokemon, 10 Pokemon, 11 Pokemon, or 12, and I chose to draft 11. I thought it was a perfect number of giving me enough points to get every Pokemon worth a spot on the team, but also giving me enough Pokemon to force my opponent to prep for a good variety. Whilst I don't disagree with people who drafted 9 Pokemon and spent all their money on some big pointers, I personally think it's harder to prep for 11 Pokemon than for 9, even if those 9 are slightly higher quality. Now, I can't guarantee that this draft is going to be a huge success. I can't guarantee that I'm going to go 6-0 or 5-0 and I'm going to make brackets and I'm going to storm my way to the final and I'm going to win this whole tournament and we're going to get the guaranteed spot in NPL Majors. I can't say anything like that because, you know, that's just not going to happen. But what I can guarantee is that we're going to have some really, really entertaining battles with this team and with the opponents we're going up against. And if you guys are excited, please do let me know down below. Please do show some support on this video. It would mean the absolute world to me. I do suspect that part of the judgment process for the people making the decision of who gets into the NPL will be kind of the quality of the content being produced by the battlers and also the support they're getting and the kind of the fan base that they have. So really, if you are excited to see the NPL tournament on the channel and you would like to see more of it, please show as much support on these videos as you can. I don't usually like to kind of like beg support like that, but in this case, because it is something huge like trying to get into a big league to bring that quality of content to the channel, I feel a little bit more comfortable in asking you guys, you know, please do comment, please do like, please do show some love for this. It would mean the absolute world for me. And hopefully I can deliver you guys the content in return that warrants that kind of support. You know, hopefully I can give you guys some great battles during this tournament that gets you guys hyped, that gets you guys wanting to like and you know, comment down below. So definitely let me know what you think of the draft, and definitely let me know what your favourite Pokemon is that we've drafted this time. Is it the returning stars like Old World and Keanu Reeves, or is it some of the new exciting ones like Galicia Pod, Sean, or like Strompful Mega Beedrill? You know, what is it that you're excited to see on this draft, and what are your hopes for this tournament? Unfortunately, at the time of recording this, the schedule hasn't actually been released yet, so I can't shout out any of my opponents, but what I can say is that everyone I've met in the community so far has been really, really nice, and I'd be excited to play any of them. All that being said, guys, I can't wait to get this started. I think we have something like 5 or 6 games over a 4-week period, and uploads are supposed to be prompt, so I will be doing my best to upload the best quality commentary I can for those 5 to 6 games minimum over that 4-week period. Definitely look out for those videos, and if we make brackets, if somehow we qualify for the knockout stage, then obviously we'll have those videos on the channel too. I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see how this draft works out, but for now, we're going to leave it there and we're going to wait and see what happens. Once again, thank you so much for your support on this video. It means everything to me. It really, really does. Thank you so much for loafing around with me, and I'll catch you again next time.